As to the presidency, the two happiest days of my life were those of my entry upon the office and of my surrender of it.
Those are the words of Martin Van Buren, our 8th president, and the subject of this, the 8th episode of the Dead Presidents Podcast. Welcome to episode 8 of the Dead Presidents Podcast. I am one of your hosts, James J. Hamilton.
And I am the other one of them, Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
And today you can call us the Van Buren Boys.
That's right.
We got 8 fingers up in honor of the 8th president.
And we're ready to roll.
Get out of our way.
Into this episode on Martin Van Buren. But first, I beg your pardon, Jim, but we got a little bit of a top 5 we got to do.
Indeed we do.
Before we talk about Martin Van Buren.
A top 5 about presidential forgiveness.
Yeah. To forgive is divine, correct?
That's right.
I believe that's what they say.
To forgive is presidential.
Perhaps it is.
As in the presidential pardoning power. Lots of very important pardons in our nation's history. We have 5 of them for you today.
It's the top 5 presidential pardons.
Number 5.
Washington pardons the Whiskey Rebels.
The Whiskey Rebellion of 1794 disintegrated before the Federal Army marching down toward western Pennsylvania, as you recall from episode 1. Most of the prominent leaders of the rebellion fled into the hills, disappearing away from Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton, who's also acting War Secretary, who came over with the army to round up some people and try to make an example out of them.
On scene.
Yep. He really wanted to get Albert Gallatin, who would later become Treasury Secretary under Jefferson and Madison, who was a big enemy of Hamilton at the time. He wanted to pin something on Gallatin, who was against the whiskey tax but not in favor of the rebellion, so he couldn't get Gallatin. And really, they couldn't get anybody big at all. Hamilton, they rounded up some people, tried to get people to inform on each other, held some people without evidence. But they didn't get any of the top leaders, and they couldn't really pin anything on anybody. But they did take 20 dudes back to Philadelphia, I think, from western Pennsylvania, and 20 people were indicted for treason. 10 of them stood trial, and these were all like secondary people, not the top leaders.
They didn't get the ringleaders.
No, and they had evidence problems and lack of witnesses, so only 2 guys were convicted of treason and sentenced to hang. Philip Wiggle, who had beaten up a federal tax collector and participated in the burning of his house, and John Mitchell, who had robbed the U.S. mail in relation to the rebellion.
Yeah, I mean, and just to reiterate, these aren't the main instigators. These aren't the ringleaders. These are people that participated in their own fashion and happened to get caught.
Yeah. So they're not really the kind of guys that you want to make an example of. And that's what President Washington felt. He felt like, we won. We crushed this rebellion pretty easily. The federal government has made its point. We've asserted our authority to enforce our tax laws. And the federal government enjoyed, a spike in popularity after their very forceful handling of the rebellion. They really showed that they were worth their stuff. And Washington didn't want to, spike the football in the rebels' faces, and felt like he could go too far and probably get a backlash if they executed these guys. So, for the first time ever, the president pardoned some people.
Just one more precedent under old Washington's belt.
And this is it's a good precedent that was continued to be followed. Pardoning people who may have committed treason, tried to overthrow the U.S. government in a way. But now once the danger's passed, you can exercise some forgiveness and let some people off.
Yeah, I'd have hung them.
Well, that's why you're not George Washington.
That's right.
Washington explained the pardons in his State of the Union address, saying, "The misled have abandoned their errors, for though I shall always think it a sacred duty to exercise with firmness and energy the constitutional powers with which I am vested, yet it appears to me no less consistent with the public good than it is with my personal feelings to mingle in the operations of government every degree of moderation and tenderness which the national justice, dignity, and safety may permit."
Wise.
Indeed. Philip Wiggle today has a Pittsburgh whiskey distillery named after him, Wiggle Whiskey, in honor of the rebellion. Good whiskey. And on this note, also honorable mention to John Adams, who later pardoned David Bradford, who was one of the major whiskey rebellion leaders. He escaped at the time.
Yeah, he squirreled away.
And Adams later pardoned him. And Adams also pardoned the leaders of Fry's Rebellion.
Right. We talked about Jacob Fry's a little bit.
1799 tax revolt in eastern Pennsylvania, following the Washington precedent of pardoning rebels after their rebellion falls apart. We might hear more of that later in the top 5 as well.
That's a distinct possibility as we proceed with the top 5 presidential pardons.
Number 4.
Jefferson pardons Sedition Act violators. In 1798, during the anti-French hysteria of the Quasi-War, John Adams signed into law the controversial Alien and Sedition Acts. The Sedition Act made it a crime to publish scandalous and malicious writings against the government of the United States, Congress, or the President with intent to defame or to bring them into contempt or disrepute or to excite against them the hatred of the good people of the United States. Some prominent anti-administration newspaper editors were prosecuted, including James T. Callender, who we've spoken of, and Benjamin Franklin Bach. The Jeffersonian Republicans denounced the Sedition Act as unconstitutional. Jefferson and Madison drafted the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions against it, and it became a major campaign issue in 1800 that contributed to Adams' defeat. The Sedition Act expired at the end of Adams' term. Upon assuming the presidency, Jefferson promptly pardoned all Sedition Act violators, and Congress repaid their fines.
Cool. It's another good pardoning precedent or use of the pardon power. When a new president believes a previous law was unconstitutional or inappropriate, he can let people off the hook.
Right.
I think probably James T. Callender, one of the most ungrateful in the history of presidential pardon recipients, I'm sure.
Yeah.
As you may recall from the Jefferson episode.
Yeah, we can't do a top 5 on that because everybody, it's a spoiler alert, it's him, number 1.
He wanted not only a pardon, he wanted a government job as well, and when he didn't get it, he published the Sally Hemings accusation against Jefferson. So that's what Jefferson gets for pardoning a guy.
And there it is.
No.
We also have an honorable mention for the Sedition Act of 1918, passed during World War I. 2,000 people were convicted under this, and many were pardoned by Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge. The rest eventually pardoned by Franklin Roosevelt.
Yep. So Woodrow Wilson, following the Adams precedent of making sedition a crime during war, and then later presidents following Jefferson in letting everyone off the hook for it.
Yep. And that's going to bring us to the top 5 presidential pardons.
Number 3.
Carter pardons draft dodgers.
Yep. In another post-war scenario,
yep,
over 200,000 people dodged the draft during the Vietnam War. Maybe as many as 100,000 of them fled the country, mostly to Canada. In 1974, President Ford offered a conditional amnesty to draft dodgers who had not yet been convicted, the condition being that they complete 2 years of public service. Not very robust as a amnesty. A lot of strings attached.
Right. What do you think? Is that fair?
Well, I mean, I guess so. It's more fair than convicting them and jailing them.
Well, what's fair?
It.
I mean, that's what this comes down to. With anything draft related, it's like, well, shit.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. Jimmy Carter thought it was fair to unconditionally pardon everyone, and that's what he promised during his campaign and beat Ford in that election. Right. And on January 21st, 1977, Carter's second day in office, he fulfilled that promise by unconditionally pardoning all Vietnam draft dodgers, extending to all violators of the Selective Service Act, but not including deserters or the dishonorably discharged or those who were convicted of violent protests.
Right. And let's be clear. Jimmy Carter was a veteran.
Yeah, he served in the Navy, so he knows what it's like. He called it the, quote, single hardest decision of his campaign. But he said that reconciliation calls for an act of mercy to bind the nation's wounds and to heal the scars of divisiveness.
A religious man,
mm-hmm.
Jimmy Carter. Very guided by faith. I think more so than many, Jimmy Carter is guided by faith.
Just a decent man.
Yeah. For better or worse.
Right.
You know? And, of course, this kind of attitude would lead to Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater calling it the most disgraceful thing that a president has ever done.
Might be a little bit of a overstatement by Barry Goldwater right there.
Well, I mean, he was, never known for not being radical.
Honorable mention on this topic also to Harry Truman, who pardoned 1,500 people for violating the Selective Service Act during World War II. Most of those getting pardons were conscientious objectors who opposed war for religious reasons.
Yeah.
I don't think there was as big of a draft dodging movement across the country in World War II as in Vietnam.
No, and
again,
still some controversy.
Yeah.
And we're about to tip the scales on the controversy factor as we come to the top 5 presidential pardons.
Number 2.
Andy Johnson pardons Confederates. Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse on April 10th, 1865. 5 days later, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and Andrew Johnson became president. This is something that nobody saw coming, that nobody wanted to happen. It was
just
his position on the ticket was a balance. He was the only Southern Democrat to remain loyal to the Union.
Yep, and this was just over a month after Andrew Johnson got hammered, trashed, and embarrassed himself.
As we have talked about before.
On episode 1's Top 5 Drunkest Presidents, number 3, Andrew Johnson.
Yep. So now Johnson's president, a Southern Democrat. People are wigged out. Lincoln had promoted a policy of amnesty for former Confederates, which Johnson, I would probably say, albeit reluctantly, continued. In May 1865, Johnson proclaimed a general amnesty for Confederates who took an oath of allegiance to the United States, with significant exceptions that excluded Confederate government officials, high-ranking military officers, and anyone worth over $20,000, all of whom would have to apply for their own separate pardons. Within a year, over 12,000 pardons were granted, mostly to people worth over $20,000. In January 1867, Johnson announced additional pardons to hundreds of high-ranking Confederate officers and government officials. Finally, on Christmas Day 1868, Johnson issued an unconditional pardon for all remaining rebels, including Confederate President Jefferson Davis and Vice President Alexander Stephens. Now, the reason I said, albeit reluctantly, Johnson's belief was that kill them all.
Yeah.
Hang them.
Yeah, I think he started off reluctant in this policy and wanted to be harsher.
He felt forced into it, I think.
Yeah.
I think he felt like I have to carry on the Lincoln administration.
Yeah. Probably at first, but then by a few years later, when he's issuing the final pardons, I think by that time he has his eye on maybe getting elected to a term in his own right, and he needs to win the South, so he needs to get some Southerners on board with him, because he ended up being not as cooperative with Republican policy as he started off being.
I mean, that's an understatement. Obviously, I mean, he gets impeached.
Yeah.
He gets totally overlooked in terms of any potential hope of running again in his own right.
Yeah, I don't think
no chance.
Didn't get nominated by either party.
No chance. No hope.
No. They were going to nominate Ulysses Grant.
That's it. And speaking of nominating Ulysses Grant, why don't we give him a little honorable mention as well here? Because as commanding general upon Lee's surrender, he gave Confederate soldiers safe conduct to return to their homes. As president, Grant signed the Amnesty Act of 1872, which removed disqualifications against holding public office from all but 500 former Confederates. Now, those must have been the nasty ones.
Yeah, I'm not sure who they were or why they had that disqualification, because I know, like, at least Alexander Stephens was in Congress, I think, and became governor of Georgia again. So a lot of high-ranking Confederates served in Congress. And
they were relatively, I don't want to say unaffected. I'm sure they were affected, but at the same time,
well,
a lot of people got to carry on.
Right. Their constituents who are voting for them are the same people who wanted to secede from the Union to begin with.
That's it. Craziness.
Indeed.
And that's going to bring us to the top 5 presidential pardon.
Number 1.
Ford pardons Nixon.
This pardon has presidents on both sides of the trade.
Yeah. And this is probably the most controversial one.
Yeah, it was pretty controversial.
I mean, I totally agree with it myself. I'll just state that right off the bat. I agree with it. I think Ford did the right thing in pardoning Nixon.
I think probably most people would agree with that now. It was just a real bitter pill to swallow for a lot of people at the time.
I can understand that, but at the same time, you got to put the best interest of the nation first.
Yeah.
There was a lot of shit to cipher through there.
It's like, yeah, Nixon was bad, but was he worse than Jefferson Davis, who we pardoned?
Yeah.
So, August 9th, 1974, Richard Nixon resigned. Gerald Ford became president. Congress abandoned its impeachment proceedings after the resignation, but criminal prosecution was still a possibility. So, September 8th, 1974, just a month after the resignation, Gerald Ford granted Nixon a full and unconditional pardon for any crimes against the United States he may have committed as president.
A full, free, and absolute pardon.
Big deal. Ford spoke to the American people explaining his decision. He said, "It is not the ultimate fate of Richard Nixon that most concerns me, though surely it deeply troubles every decent and every compassionate person. My concern is the immediate future of this great country. My conscience tells me clearly and certainly that I cannot prolong the bad dreams that continue to reopen a chapter that is closed. My conscience tells me that only I, as president, have the constitutional power to firmly shut and seal this book. My conscience tells me it is my duty not merely to proclaim domestic tranquility, but to use every means that I have to ensure it."
As we said, very controversial.
There were allegations of some corrupt bargain, like Nixon had agreed to resign in exchange for Ford agreeing to pardon him, but there's never really any evidence of that. Ford's press secretary resigned in protest over the pardon. Ford's approval rating dropped from 71% to 50%.
Yeah.
And that was considered to be a major factor in his defeat at the hands of Jimmy Carter a couple years later.
Sure. And it absolutely was. And unfairly, if I'm honest. I think that in all honesty, and from a completely objective standpoint, that was the best course of action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of the most recent or modern example of kind of the theme of a lot of these pardons, which is it's more important for the nation to move on than it is to punish particular people.
Exactly. And maybe history has kind of warmed up to Ford on this.
Yeah, in 2001, Ted Kennedy presented,
of all people,
the John F. Kennedy Profile in Courage Award to Gerald Ford because of his pardon of Nixon. And Ted Kennedy said that he initially opposed the pardon, but that history had proven it to be the right decision.
And I think now, you got to understand how diametrically opposed these two people would have been. So for Ted Kennedy to say something like that, there's definitely some just what should be common knowledge behind the fact that Gerald Ford did the right thing.
A true blue Democrat like Ted Kennedy, and also the Kennedy family had their rivalry with Nixon. So if Ted Kennedy thought it was okay in the long run, it probably wasn't that bad.
Well, it's just somebody like Ted Kennedy to say that is just more proof that, it was the right thing to do. And what do you think, Jim? Were these pardons all across the board the right thing to do?
I think they all were.
I think so too. I made a joke about hanging them earlier, but
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't see how the nation would have been better off, going through the effort of punishing.
Some of the things would have been just nonsensical. Who would remember the names of the whiskey rebels that were hung?
Well,
Who would have remembered the names of the Sedition Act violators that were hung or jailed for life? You know what I mean?
Well, Sedition Act, they weren't jailed for life. I think actually I read one of the guys got 18 months, and that was the harshest punishment. Huh. So actually most of the Sedition Act guys, their punishments were already over by the time they were pardoned, but it was more symbolic. And yeah, we might remember the names of the Whiskey Rebellion guys if they had been hanged, because they probably would have become a rallying point for more rebellion. So I think probably all these pardons are good in the long run of history as a way of the country moving on past difficult times.
And times can sure be difficult.
Indeed.
We're going to talk about some difficult times for the country here during this, our 8th episode. But first, we're going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to visit our wonderful sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to get into Martin Van Buren, our nation's 8th chief executive. Thanks for tuning in.
The Dead Presidents Podcast is brought to you in part by Dr. Lesage's Gonorrhea Eradicator. This remedy for the most distressing disease incident to the human race originated from the enlightened mind of the eminent Dr. Lesage. Its promulgation and success throughout the kingdoms of France and Italy has of late years added such high honors to the already highly honored name of Dr. Lesage. Tens of thousands of Parisians will agree. This medicine gives immediate relief and is the best and surest remedy for the above-mentioned loathsome disease. Listeners, don't just treat your gonorrhea, eradicate it with Dr. Lesage's Gonorrhea Eradicator. Get yourself a bottle today for the incredibly low price of $1.
It really works. Now, an important message from our sponsor, Baker & Bridges, who have for sale a large quantity of boots and shoes. 80 dozen pairs of heavy-made boots and shoes, a superior article, manufactured at the Western Penitentiary of Pennsylvania at Pittsburgh, received on consignment and available for sale by Baker & Bridges. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a rare opportunity. These boots and shoes are 100% guaranteed to be the product of involuntary prison labor, and you know what that means. They could be offered for sale at unbeatably low prices. The murderers and rapists housed at the Western Penitentiary of Pennsylvania are good for one thing and one thing only: providing you, dear listener, with affordable, quality footwear. Baker & Bridges has the hookup, and they'll make sure our listeners' feet are ensconced in the finest criminal-made comfort available this side of the Alleghenies. This is a message from our sponsor, Baker & Bridges.
Now an important message from our sponsor, Matthew Brodock. My wife, Elnora Brodock, having been by Catholic influences enticed away from my bed and board under the pretense that our marriage was not lawful because solemnized by a Protestant preacher and not by a papal priest, I hereby give notice not to trust her, as I will pay no debts of her contracting, and to forewarn all persons against abetting, harboring, and supporting her in her wicked ways and her violation of our marriage vows.
My goodness.
There you have it, listeners. Elnora Brodock has been stolen away from her loving husband by vile and insidious popery.
Despicable.
She's probably out there right now, brazenly violating her marriage vows in total depravity, all under the crooked dispensation of the Bishop of Rome. So don't lend her any money, and keep an eye on your own wife to guard your marriage against the seductive corruption of the Catholic Church.
Because they're out to get you.
Listeners, if your spouse is using religious differences to justify cheating on you and you want to call them out with an ad on our show, hit us up on Twitter at DeadPrezPodcast, where you can learn more about our sponsors and see their original ads published in newspapers during Martin Van Buren's presidency.
And now, back to the show. And we're back with episode 8 of the Dead Presidents Podcast. We're here to talk about Martin Van Buren.
MVB.
MVB boys for life, yo. What?
Word.
Yeah. So where did it all begin for Martin Van Buren? Well, it began when he popped out of the womb on December 5th, 1782. The first president born after the Declaration of Independence, and thus the first president born an American citizen, not a British subject. However, the first president that was born an American citizen...
He's got to be all American.
Not quite.
How
English
so?
Was Martin Van Buren's second language. He did not grow up speaking English. He grew up speaking Dutch. His family were Dutch immigrants who had come to America 5 generations back, settled in Kinderhook, New York, near Albany, the state capital. And his father, Abraham Van Buren, was a farmer and tavern keeper who supported the Revolution and later the Jeffersonian Republicans. But initially, Martin Van Buren spoke Dutch as a kid coming up. He learned English later and then worked very, very hard to curb his Dutch accent.
Yeah. Yeah, his family had been in America for generations, but they kept marrying within this little Dutch community, keeping their Dutchness pure from other, the English and other immigrants for generations. Dutch.
Yeah. As was common in that area.
Yeah.
At the time, it was just a prominently Dutch area. And so, of course, Van Buren was obviously fluent in Dutch. It was his first language, and he continued speaking it throughout his life. His wife was Dutch. They would speak it together in private. He was able to speak to Dutch folks in the community. He used that to political advantage, I'm sure, among the common folk of Kinderhook.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until a certain point that he worked pretty hard to curb his accent.
Yeah, once he gets into public speaking.
Yeah, when he gets into public speaking and once he gets on to the national stage, I guess he feels it behooves him to make an effort to sound Americanized. And it's interesting to think about that because I've always found dialect fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Different dialects in different regions and how things develop over time. When did the English start to wear off? When did you start getting your hard R's, I'm an American? When did that start coming into the picture? When did military become military?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
I can't say military.
Nuclear.
The weather is bad today if you're in the military. I don't know. It bothers me. I can't say it.
That's how Van Buren was trying to sound to advance
Or was it? I don't know.
Political
I'm like the whole thing. I'm mystified. We could do a whole like additional like bonus podcast episode on
We'll do a whole episode in
dialect in America and how it changed over time. When did the English fade out? When did you start getting your Virginians? Because that would have started with an English.
Yeah. That's weird.
Maybe not quite like, me father. I went to the theater. Not quite that, but it's like my father and I went to the theater. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably some people from like the same neighborhood of England came over here. One of them settled in New England and the other one in Georgia, and then generations later they have totally different accents.
I don't know. It's interesting, but totally off topic, and
well, that's just part of the melting pot of
it's
America
the
from the beginning.
The melting pot of America, and so that's where Van Buren was at. I mean, the guy grew up speaking Dutch. He learned English as a second language and worked hard to try and eliminate his accent from his speech. But it is said that when he would get flustered or excited, that it flared up. And the Dutch accent was prevalent in those instances. He grew up, like as we said before, his father ran a tavern. So he grows up listening to political conversations in the tavern, which is subsequently frequented by politicians and lawyers traveling the court circuit, including none other than Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr.
Yep, all coming through.
He's coming up in the thick of it.
Yeah. Everyone's staying at the old Van Buren tavern, and he gets a front row seat to some of the most prominent guys in the country.
Yeah.
And we talked about Jackson being the first president who kind of grew up poor and, as legitimately a common man and not part of our, kind of the country's aristocracy.
Right.
Van Buren will be another president who grew up poor and kind of disadvantaged. He didn't get that much of an education, went to a one-room schoolhouse for a bit, got to study Latin just very briefly, but his family couldn't afford for him to get a more robust education.
That would have, of course, been his third language.
Yeah.
As well as, I don't know, it wasn't typical schooling. You'd have to learn, Latin, Greek.
Yeah, those were the, big high
when they actually
education
taught
things.
kids to do stuff.
Yeah, when kids...
how in Russia they teach kids to play chess.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Way ahead out there.
Yeah, by the time Aaron Burr was 16 years old, he graduated from Princeton College and spoke Latin and Greek and all kind of shit. And now,
now 16-year-olds are trying to.
They're crying because the SAT was too hard.
The SAT's too hard, and they're afraid that I don't know, something about masturbation.
Yeah, so when Van Buren was 14, he wasn't doing any of that. But he was done. He was out of school by the time he was 14. His family couldn't afford to keep sending him. So he got an apprenticeship, started out sweeping out the office of a lawyer in Kinderhook, Francis Sylvester. So Van Buren, basically becomes a legal apprentice.
Yeah, and this guy kind of influences Van Buren on multiple levels. This is an important figure in Van Buren's life.
Yeah,
and kind of helps to mold him in terms of his personality.
Yeah, I think the first day maybe Van Buren came into the office, Francis Sylvester said something to him to the effect of you look like a bum. And Van Buren went out and got himself a fancy outfit to wear. And from then on, he was a very well dresser.
Super meticulous. And obviously we'll talk about our visit to Van Buren's home in Kinderhook, Lindenwald. But might as well bring it up right off the bat in terms of what Martin Van Buren was like as opposed to his contemporaries. He very weirdly, very unusually, very strangely, something nobody did. Like, what is wrong with this guy? What's up with him? He takes a bath every day, James?
What? That's ridiculous.
People talk. I've heard gossip. He looks like he's been freshly scrubbed. All the time.
I don't know. I think once every couple of months ought to be sufficient.
Hey, in most households, Saturday night is bath night.
Yeah.
I don't know what this Van Buren fellow's thinking about bathing every day. What a weirdo.
Well,
must be something, some kind of Dutch complaint.
I don't know.
To harken back to John Adams there. With a Dutch complaint. Anywho.
Yeah, so Van Buren's training.
Very clean.
Yep.
A very clean dude for the time.
Clean cut, well dressed.
Super meticulous.
Bit
fancy.
of a dandy in his appearance.
Curly red locks.
Yep. He's, studying to become a lawyer. At age 20, he goes to New York City and continued his legal apprenticeship under William Van Ness, the political lieutenant of Aaron Burr, who would go on to serve as Burr's second in his duel with Hamilton.
Yeah.
Van Buren making political connections to some top guys. This ought to be when that was probably around the time Burr was vice president at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Because Van Buren gets admitted to the bar in 1803, joining his half-brother's law practice at home in Kinderhook.
He was making a name for himself pretty quickly as a lawyer. He was a very good public speaker.
And like we'd mentioned before, like he worked really hard. I mean, he really had an effective way of speaking. He was very, very clear. He enunciated everything. Crisp, perfect dictation. Just phenomenal. Like, really labored at it. And was known as an excellent public speaker.
Yeah, so he rose pretty quickly in the legal profession. Soon he was making $10,000 a year. Can you believe this? A guy bathes every day, makes $10,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's the life. Now, $10,000 was a lot of money at the time.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's about what Hamilton and Burr made around the same time when they were the top lawyers in New York City. So Van Buren basically about as successful as you can get as a practicing lawyer at the time.
Yeah, and so much cleaner than everybody.
Yep.
And, not only, like, a propensity for, like, good public speech, phenomenal memory, and good talent for analytics, research, very into diagnosis of whatever the issue was. He loved to delve in there and dissect the problem and try and analyze it. And
he knew all the angles,
Yeah.
knew all the sides.
really, really, what would you call that? Like bookworm-ish?
Meticulous.
Not really. Yeah, meticulous in learning as well as dress. Perhaps. Yeah, but somebody that would overanalyze things, maybe, to a point where perhaps we'll get to it later that maybe it hindered him.
Perhaps. Well, it's helping him a lot in his early life.
Absolutely. I mean, as we said, dude's making bank. So it's time to get hooked up, yo.
Yeah, he now has his own, he's financially independent. He can support a family. So he can finally propose to his childhood sweetheart, Hannah Hose. of the same Kinderhook Dutch community. I think she was his first cousin once removed.
Yeah.
Keeping it in the family in the,
Right.
the Van Buren tradition, keeping their bloodline pure.
Yeah.
So they can continue to speak Dutch at home, I guess.
Yeah.
They had 5 sons together, 4 who survived past infancy. And, their marriage seemed to be a happy one, but there is very little known about Hannah Van Buren.
Yeah. Like, harkening back to episode 3 where we talked about Jefferson.
Yeah.
And his wife. Not a lot known.
Yeah, she died in 1819, well before he became president.
Right. As a matter of fact, James, can you name Thomas Jefferson's wife?
Martha Jefferson?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I was just testing you. I had personally forgotten.
I wouldn't have been able to name Van Buren's wife before I researched for this episode.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hannah Hose.
She had a, quote, loving, gentle disposition and a modest, timid manner, dying of tuberculosis at age 35.
That old TB.
Never served as First Lady. And not mentioned in Martin Van Buren's unfinished autobiography.
That's of note. Yeah, that is of note. He didn't mention his wife in his uncompleted autobiography.
Well, I think he probably...
Too hard to talk about.
Well, yeah. I don't think he talked about a lot of personal stuff in the autobiography, and also I think he probably just didn't mention his wife generally to, keep her out of the public side of his life. He's used to being criticized. Probably saw how Rachel Jackson got dragged through the mud. True. Didn't want his wife's name.
So maybe it's more tact.
Yeah. But also, the thing is, Van Buren never remarried.
Yeah.
He was in his 30s, at least, when...
So, yeah, he figured... he's tactful. He's figured, well, I'm not going to bring her into this.
He must have,
business.
Loved her very much. Couldn't imagine being with anybody else.
And that, too, is going to come into play down the road. For Martin Van Buren, and in a big way.
Unforeseen major boon to his career to not be married when he goes to Washington.
Yeah.
As we'll find out later.
So now, young Martin Van Buren is starting out in politics. He resists in treaties to join the Federalist Party that dominates New York throughout the 1790s and resolves to sink or swim with the Republicans. So in 1800, he's 18 years old. He's campaigning for Thomas Jefferson, getting in on the ground floor.
Yep. He stayed away from the Federalists at just the right time.
Right.
The Jeffersonian Republicans take over not just in the federal government, but in the state of New York as well. And he helped with that victory. And now his two, political idols, Burr and Jefferson, are atop the government. But those two guys don't stay friends for very long.
No.
And pretty soon, Burr is running for governor of New York against the candidate put up by the Jefferson-allied Clinton faction.
Yeah.
And Van Buren was, the apprentice of William Van Ness. Got a lot of probably Burr supporting friends, but Van Buren sticks with the party, maintains party loyalty, and voted against Burr.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting fact when considered alongside one of the myths or tall tales about Martin Van Buren.
Right.
Which was the myth that he was the illegitimate son of Aaron Burr. Which I don't know what that's supposed to be based on. Maybe they kind of look a little bit alike. They were both kind of had a receding hairline. Both
Yeah,
kind of
that's always been
guys.
kind of a tough one for me to swallow.
And Burr was, he was around,
Yeah.
Mrs. Van Buren at the time, probably, and I'm sure would have no reservations. I'm sure Aaron Burr was banging all kind of women.
Sure.
All over New York at the time. But it doesn't really seem to be, I don't know when that arose or under what circumstances, but it's an enduring myth that not really based on anything. I don't think after this, when Van Buren voted against him for governor, I don't think they had any other notable contacts. Because Burr did have illegitimate children, and if Van Buren had been his son, I'm sure they would have had some kind of contact throughout the next. Because Burr lived a long time.
Yeah, you'd think there'd be something that I don't really buy into that one.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be based on anything solid.
No. But interesting, nonetheless. So, Van Buren, he's making a name for himself. He's doing pretty well, as a matter of fact. By 1812, he's elected to the New York State Senate. He's a leading supporter of the War of 1812, pushes for New York to take strong pro-war measures. Politically, kind of favors the little guy.
Yeah, against the Federalist-dominated banking class, and there's this small group of aristocratic families that own all the land in New York.
Yeah.
Including, Dutch families like Van Rensselaer and others who Van Buren goes up against as a lawyer and a politician.
Yeah. The wealthy New York Dutch were like a thing.
Yeah.
Huge thing.
Yeah, I saw a thing. Stephen Van Rensselaer, who was the head of that family around this time, was, possibly one of the richest Americans ever, proportionate to, how much wealth was in the country.
Yeah.
'Cause it's one family owns half the state of New York, practically.
Yeah, and at this time, my God. I mean, that's you could put, a solid percentage of, the country. Not solid crazy, but,
Mm-hmm.
You know what I fucking mean. Fuck you.
Yeah. And these are the people that Van Buren goes up against and wins with the tide of Jeffersonianism is going in that way at this time. Van Buren, one of the first politicians to advocate the abolition of debtor's prison.
Yeah.
Which was a thing which seems crazy. If you owe money you can't pay back, you get put in prison.
Yeah.
Which would seem to hinder your ability
to
make that
earn
money.
the money to pay back. Yeah.
But that was one of the things that Van Buren went up against and ended up being, that was abolished around this time, I think.
Yeah. I believe so.
1815, he was appointed Attorney General of the state of New York, and he served in that capacity for 4 years while continuing to hold his Senate seat. He supported the Erie Canal project that was promoted by Governor DeWitt Clinton, but at the same time, he became the leader of an anti-Clinton faction of New York Republicans called the Bucktails.
Yeah. So, I think it was kind of hinted at before with Jefferson and Burr. And now this. Van Buren is beginning to manifest himself as a master politician that could play both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, this is really where he
really starts becoming a true form politician. Basically, I think Martin Van Buren is the mold upon which any politician would want to base himself in terms of...
Yeah, in terms of a if you think of a backroom wheeling and dealing type politician, Van Buren was the epitome of that.
Yeah, archetypal.
Yeah. So now he's going to, starting his own faction of the party, and with his skills as a party leader and organizer, that's where he's going to make his mark on American politics more than anything else. Because during the founding era, political parties were unofficial and very loose.
It's willy-nilly. It's hither and thither.
Nobody wanted to admit that they were in a party.
Right.
At the beginning. But by Van Buren's time, it's, starting to become more entrenched, and he is going to be at the forefront of organizing it and taking full advantage of party structure.
We've obviously in previous episodes we've seen division.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been necessarily termed along party lines. But we're going to start getting into parties.
Now parties are going to be running things, and Van Buren's going to be pulling the strings. Because now, if a party is an official thing with members that know what the party line is, and everybody votes together and says the same thing, that multiplies the power that they all have. And that's what Van Buren starts doing.
Yeah, and Van Buren happens to be a master of discipline.
Just keeping all the party on the same page and in line.
He's a master of organization. I think was the word. He's a master of organization. He is able to coordinate this stuff masterfully. Yeah, I think it's really the first time we're seeing it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the scale that he's doing it, it's going to become unprecedented.
He's top politician. If there was a Dead Presidents podcast, top 5 presidential politicians, perhaps MVB would be number 1.
He'd be up there. So, I guess unsurprisingly, given all we said, Van Buren's Bucktail faction was pretty soon dominating the New York state government. It was exercising control over nominating conventions, which were another way for the party to control things. And they were dispensing the patronage to the party faithful, the spoil system all over the state of New York. It became known as the Albany Regency, and it was one of the first political machines in American history. Controlled the state of New York for 15 years.
Yeah.
All starting with Martin Van Buren.
And New York political machines, I mean, this wasn't going to be the last. That it's going to become an integral part of New York state and national politics for a long time.
Tammany Hall was already
I was just going to bring up Tammany Hall.
A thing in New York City at this time, and now the Albany Regency is given marching orders to the Tammany Hall boys during this time.
Yeah.
And with all that power, Van Buren is going to get himself sent to the United States Senate.
Yeah.
In 1821. And became pretty prominent in the Senate pretty quickly. Served as chairman of the Senate Finance and Judiciary Committees.
Yeah. And Van Buren's trying to build a national machine.
Yeah, because this is the era of good feelings where the first party system had broken down. And around this time, there's not a clearly defined two-party system in the national government. The Federalist Party's dead, and there's not really anything else.
So Van Buren sees it as prime time to set something up.
Yeah. He's going to build, he wants to do nationally what he did in New York.
Right. And he is really becoming renowned. His behind-the-scenes maneuvering, his gift for ducking touchy questions.
Yeah, he's...
just all the qualities of what you would consider your standard politician.
Yeah, you know.
It's Van Buren.
He knows how to, like, keep everyone happy, try to please people on both sides of an issue. I think there was one time where, I forget what it was, he was giving a speech about some issue, and after he was done speaking, the two guys who heard him were like, oh yeah, that was a good speech, really good speech. Wait, like, what side of that issue was he on?
Yeah.
It's the politician's gift to just talk and talk without really saying anything.
Yeah.
You don't make anyone upset, and you can be everybody's friend.
Exactly. And so...
But he became, like, so good at this almost that it kind of got him a little... He
gets branded.
He got a reputation.
The little magician.
The sly
fox. The red fox of Kinderhook.
Davy Crockett said Van Buren could laugh on one side of his face and cry on the other at one and the same time. One senator once said to Van Buren, "It's been rumored that the sun rises in the east. Do you believe it?" Van Buren replied, "I understand that's the common acceptance, Senator, but as I never get up until after dawn, I can't really say."
Brilliant.
Not going to commit himself to either side of that issue.
And I mean, that has never escaped, like, politics. Like, that has become a thing.
Yeah.
Depending on your side, like, your willingness to answer a question. And another thing that was said about this time, about Van Buren, was he rowed to his objects with muffled oars, which I think is a pretty awesome description of his, like, approach to... He'd be able to come up to somebody and talk them into going his way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he used all these skills to, you know, build a political coalition that he's going to forge into a powerful party at the time when there's no parties.
Yeah.
He's going to make one.
And the culmination of this brings us to the election of 1824.
Yeah, Van Buren is like the power broker for the state of New York. And this is a time when New York is becoming the richest, most populated, and most powerful state in the Union. The Erie Canal is a huge boon for New York. It gets, you know, the Port of New York gets all the, you know, tax revenue comes in.
Right.
New York is now the biggest deal. And Van Buren wants to use that. He wants to recreate the New York-Virginia alliance that Jefferson and first Burr and then the Clintons used to take over. But this time, Virginia is going to be the junior partner. And New York is going to be the, you know, the shit. So Van Buren he travels around the country, goes throughout the South to make political connections. And he actually went to Monticello and met the aging Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
Just at the moment when Van Buren's trying to recreate the Jeffersonian Party.
Right.
And this is the wide open election of 1824.
In a pretty cool meeting, because at the time, this is the bridge between the old generation and the new.
Yeah.
So for Van Buren to go and visit with Jefferson.
Yeah, it's like he kind of like gets his blessing.
Yeah.
And then can use that connection to help himself. So 1824, Van Buren puts his support behind Treasury Secretary William Crawford of Georgia, who he thinks will be the perfect figurehead for the new Jeffersonian Party that he's trying to build.
Yeah.
But
unfortunately,
yeah,
little setback.
A little bit.
Crawford has a debilitating stroke. He's crippled physically, well as his candidacy.
Yeah, but Van Buren stuck behind him anyway.
That's right.
And he kept supporting Crawford, who continued to run even though he had just had a debilitating stroke. And he got third in the election. He beat Henry Clay.
Yeah.
But sticking behind Crawford, he wasn't able to get behind a winner and wasn't able to take his party dream to its full conclusion.
Yeah.
But he's not going to make the same mistake next time.
He's pissed.
Yeah.
He's pissed off.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, John Quincy Adams ended up president after that election when the House decided in his favor because no candidate got a majority. But the candidate who got the most votes was Andrew Jackson, and his supporters almost immediately begin pushing him for the 1828 election.
Oh, yeah. They're hungry for vengeance fresh off the bat.
Yeah. As you recall from episodes 6 and 7.
Yeah.
The Jackson supporters were very aggressive. And Van Buren is going to see Jackson now as the figurehead that he needs for his party. Jackson's the most popular guy. He's the war hero. Van Buren thinks he can work with him.
Maybe a little bit of polish. We could shape this guy into the next Washington.
Yeah.
Maybe that's his line of thought.
Well, that's what he starts, doing behind the scenes, as is his, where he shines the most. 4 years they have to get ready for this next election. Van Buren is working to put all the different factions of what's going to become the Democratic Party together.
Well, he's building a network
that had been all split amongst a bunch of different candidates in the last election and doesn't have any unity. He's got the Jackson people, and he puts them with the Crawford people. He even gets the Calhoun people on board. Calhoun became vice president in 1824, but he'd had his eye on the presidency then and still.
Yeah.
And now Van Buren basically gets Calhoun to sign up for vice president under Jackson instead of Adams.
That's it.
I think Van Buren...
This is Martin Van Buren, the master political manipulator, the master politician in his prime. If you're a Martin Van Buren fan, this is the best part of the episode for you. Like this time right here, because this is the brightest that he shines, I think, pretty much in his whole political career. And he builds an organization that becomes the Democratic Party.
It's like his brainchild.
It is.
If it weren't for him...
A lot of people think Jackson, first Democrat, but it wouldn't have been if not for Van Buren.
Yeah, Jackson, he might have won 1828 anyway, but he wouldn't have had the unified coalition
there wouldn't have been that
enabled
network.
Him to win every political battle of his presidency.
Like the networking and the organization and the maneuvering that went behind this.
But you know what? Jackson,
probably unsurpassed.
Yeah. Jackson actually might not have won 1828. Right? Jackson might not have won 1828 if more other people had run and split the vote. It would have went to the House again.
Possibly.
Which was a strategy, an electoral strategy at that time when there weren't clear parties. That's what they tried to do in 1836 unsuccessfully.
It was like a shitty chess game.
Yeah. Well, when there's not a clear two-party system and it's hard to know what to do, but Van Buren knew what to do.
Yeah.
Get everyone unified into a party that would end up dominating American politics up to the Civil War.
Yeah, so straight up, we could say, like, this is Van Buren's legacy. Like, we don't have to wait to the end of the episode to say, like, this is where Martin Van Buren truly makes his mark on American history.
Yeah, you can kind of trace the modern Democratic Party back to the Jeffersonian Republicans, but it was really Van Buren refounded the Jeffersonian Party at this time. And that's the party that's continued to this day.
Refounded, it might be an understatement. I mean, it was a total upheaval, a total reorganization, a total re-networking. He really built up a completely new thing and was able to unite different factions that would they have come together otherwise? Did it take somebody with the skill of Van Buren to bring these people together? Mm-hmm. Can we, is it possible that people have understated Van Buren's importance in history?
Well, if people judge him...
It seems like it.
Yeah, if people judge him from his presidency, it's, easy to overlook him.
Yeah.
But he had... I don't think a lot of people would try to claim that, the Jacksonian era wasn't huge, and Van Buren was making it happen right there beside Jackson.
Maybe more so than
so Jackson. A lot of maybe his contributions are somewhat overlooked because it was behind the scenes. That's where he did his work.
That's where he thrived. And after all, it's called the Age of Jackson, but the Age of Jackson happened because the work of Van Buren.
Yeah, Van Buren whipped all the votes together for it.
Yeah. So, that was Van Buren's time to shine. And unfortunately, things aren't going to go too well for too much longer. 1828 rolls around. After 1824, the supporters of Jackson, who had got the most votes after all, they'd been campaigning the whole time.
So Jackson's running strong with Van Buren's party organization behind him, and some of Van Buren's New York friends convince him that it's going to help Jackson's candidacy even more if Van Buren ran for governor of New York in 1828. So he did, and he won. So becomes governor of New York, but Jackson also won. And so Van Buren is only going to serve as governor for a couple months before he resigns to go take the top cabinet post in the new Jackson administration.
Pretty interesting stuff. Just gets elected to be governor, and it's like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Got a dip.
It was kind of just a political
something else came along.
Yep.
I couldn't turn it down.
It's Secretary of State, which is,
as we know,
often been a stepping stone to the presidency. Other than Jackson, the past 4 presidents had all been secretaries of state before.
Yeah.
Van Buren, he didn't really have any foreign policy experience, but hey, who cares? He can be Secretary of State.
Sure. Guy's a master politician. Let's see what he does.
Yeah, well, he does some... Van Buren's foreign policy issues weren't necessarily the most exciting or important part of his Secretary of State tenure, but he did negotiate a commercial treaty with Turkey for navigational rights on the Black Sea, renewed trade agreements with the British West Indies, negotiated Napoleonic War reparations from France. But it was more his role as what he became as Jackson's closest advisor and got his hand in all the administration's policies. See, he barely even knew Jackson before this.
Yeah, they had met twice.
Yeah, when he accepted Jackson as the figurehead of the party he was building, he didn't even know this guy. But when he showed up to be Secretary of State, they pretty much hit it off immediately. And would
Bit of a bromance blossomed.
Yep. And they became really close, and that was... Van Buren was unable to get close to Jackson because Jackson had lots of problems with other people around him at the time, as you recall from last episode.
Yep. Things were exacerbated due to, as you'll remember, the Peggy Eaton affair.
Peggy Eaton, of course, the new wife of the new war secretary, John Eaton. Is his name John?
Yeah.
Okay, I almost forgot his name. But anyway, the rumor around Washington was that Peggy Eaton was a bit of a loose woman who may have been involved with John Eaton while her previous husband was still alive. Lots of unsubstantiated but very nasty rumors about them, and Washington high society, particularly the ladies, decide that they're not going to associate with Peggy Eaton, and the Eatons are ostracized from the social circle, led by Floride Calhoun, wife of the vice president, and joined by pretty much everyone else in Jackson's cabinet except Van Buren.
Yeah.
And this is where him not having a wife becomes a huge boon to his career.
Yeah, it's a massive political boon.
Because women weren't willing to associate with Peggy Eaton. Van Buren doesn't have to worry about his wife.
And, let's just as a refresher, state that the Peggy Eaton thing, her husband was in the Navy, and I guess the story was she started seeing the Secretary of War, and her Navy husband killed himself as a result of it.
Oh. He died of a disease, but the rumor was that he slit his own throat.
Right.
Because of her infidelity.
Yeah. So, I mean, just as a backdrop for this.
He could have placed an ad in the paper. My wife, Peggy, has left my bed and board.
He should have
engaged in
considered that.
Disgraceful conduct with John Eaton of Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could slit your own throat.
Yeah.
Which is probably preferable to placing an ad like that.
Yeah, wow.
But, yeah, there was... I don't know.
Just to provide a little bit of background into that.
A lot of the things said about Peggy Eaton were probably false, but she also probably wasn't wearing a white wedding dress to her wedding appropriately.
Sure. But, I mean, all said and done, Van Buren is so endeared to Jackson now.
Yeah, because he's like the only one who sides with Jackson.
It's like, you are my brother now, you know? The
Eaton question became the test of loyalty, and Van Buren was one of the only ones who passed.
Yeah.
Even Andrew Jackson Donaldson, who was like practically Jackson's son, and his wife were on the outs because of this. And most of the cabinet was lined up behind John C. Calhoun on this issue and alienated themselves from Jackson. And Van Buren, it gets the benefit of all this.
Yeah. I do want to bring up a little bit of a side note, just in case it doesn't get mentioned in episode 11. James K. Polk also escaped any kind of ire from Jackson over this whole affair. Because, as we may have mentioned before, Sarah Polk was a remarkable first lady and basically a political partner with her husband. And she was educated and opinionated and had no qualms about speaking her mind. James K. Polk, perhaps shrewdly, decided that she needed to go back to Tennessee to check up on the family and Mississippi to check up on the plantation and things during this time. So Sarah Polk was conveniently absent from D.C. during this affair.
Yeah.
And Polk kept his mouth shut, and he was able also to endear himself to Jackson. Mm-hmm. During this affair. So basically, Van Buren and him were virtually the only two that
came out ahead.
Not only unscathed, but ahead.
Yeah, because, there's kind of even though Van Buren and Calhoun had been united in the new party, as far as this election goes, there's kind of a rivalry between them.
There absolutely is.
When Jackson became president, he was the oldest guy to become president at the time, and he was in very poor health. And actually, right before he became president, a rumor swept the country that he was dead. A lot of people expected Jackson to not last his 4 years, and nobody expected him to serve 8 years. So there was really almost immediately jockeying for who's going to be next president. And it was Van Buren and Calhoun. And this Peggy Eaton issue put Van Buren over the top and put Calhoun on the outs.
Yeah, because obviously, it sure wasn't going to be Richard Johnson.
No. No, we'll get into him in a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now Van Buren is riding high. And actually, not only does he win the Peggy Eaton scandal, but he solves it for Jackson. Because this hung over his whole first term. Jackson and Eaton didn't want to, give in to the people talking shit about them. But as long as Eaton's around, this is going to taint everything. And Van Buren's the one who figured the way out of it, where Van Buren is going to resign as Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Which gives Eaton cover to resign as War Secretary.
A bold maneuver.
And then gives Jackson cover to demand the resignations of all the disloyal members of his cabinet. So he ends up turning over the entire cabinet to get out of the Eaton scandal. But Van Buren is kind of the hero of the whole thing.
It's one hell of a wild move in a chess game, political chess game.
Well, there's going to be a little bit more chess going on between Van Buren and Calhoun.
Yeah, that's for sure. We're not done.
So
it's the opening salvo.
Van Buren's
of
reward.
This political chess match.
I like this next chess move. I just think it's funny. It's a Van Buren's reward for his loyalty. Now that he's left the Secretary of State, Jackson is appointing him minister to Great Britain.
Yeah,
puts him in as a recess appointment. He sails off to Britain, and he's there for about 6 months before the Senate votes on his actual confirmation. The Senate vote is a tie, and who breaks the tie but Vice President John C. Calhoun, who votes to reject Van Buren's nomination as Minister to Great Britain. And Calhoun is just overjoyed at this. He felt like he just ended Van Buren's career. He said, quote, "It will kill him dead, sir. Kill him dead. He will never kick, sir. Never kick." But
wow,
that kind of backfired a little bit. This is, I feel like this is when John C. Calhoun would be on the episode of Dave Chappelle's When Keeping It Real Goes Wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Instead of killing Van Buren's career, he enables Van Buren to take Calhoun's own job.
Yeah.
Because people saw this as so petty. This, like in Britain, they were shocked.
Yeah.
Like, how could, he used to be the Secretary of State. He's the foreign minister of the United States. How could he not be qualified to be an ambassador?
Right.
It's just so petty.
Yeah.
That it made Calhoun look bad.
It made him look like a real asshole. And
it generated sympathy for Van Buren. So this is, heading into... This is early 1832 when that vote happens.
Right.
And this is around the time that the National Convention is going to choose the nominees for the next election. Yep. And Jackson wants Van Buren to be the next president after him. And so...
Yep. He has decided Van Buren is his hand-picked successor. In so much as that Jackson, in a sense, was Van Buren's illustrated original for this new system.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And so Van Buren is going to get the nod for vice president. John C. Calhoun is out. This is even before the nullification crisis that would render him,
right,
a villain in American history. But the Peggy Eaton scandal would alone take him out of Jackson's favor. So with Jackson's support and the sympathy generated by Calhoun's vindictiveness.
And his wife's big mouth.
Indeed. And also, doesn't hurt to have the Albany Regency still controlling the state of New York and its delegates to the National Convention.
Right.
Van Buren gets nominated as vice president. And after Jackson wins re-election in a landslide, Van Buren's the number 2 guy.
And pretty well deserved.
Yeah.
Van Buren has, certainly worked for it. I think if you came into this episode knowing jack shit about Van Buren, at this point this dude was a master politician. I think more so than any previous president, hands down.
Yeah,
this guy totally exemplifies a politician.
Yeah, no other previous president engaged in politics like this.
Not like this.
They all,
no, sir.
Would like to consider themselves above that kind of thing, but times were changing, and Van Buren was kind of the one changing them.
Yeah. And so, he's vice president. Side to side. With Andy Jackson.
Yeah, they're going, they go riding together.
Part of the family.
Yeah, he's part of a family.
Like I said before, it's like, you're my brother.
Yeah, because Jackson, his wife was dead. He didn't have any biological children. His family was who he chose as his family. And
right.
Who's he got celebrating Christmas at the White House but Van Buren? This is a funny anecdote.
Yeah, this is a really good story. I love this. This is Christmas 1835 at the White House, just to set the scene. And picture this if you can, as Sophia Petrillo would say, picture it. Christmas 1835, the White House. Out on the front lawn. Some people are gathered. And we get a little game going on.
Yeah, Van Buren's there celebrating with Jackson's family, Andrew and Emily Donaldson's children, a lot of kids running around the White House, as this is quoting from John Meacham, American Lion. At one point, Van Buren lost a game of tag. He's playing with the children. Van Buren lost a game of tag and was forced to stand on one leg and say,
"Here I stand all ragged and dirty. If you don't come kiss me, I'll run like a turkey."
No one came to kiss him, and so the Vice President of the United States, and putative favorite to be president himself in 15 months' time, strutted like a game gobbler across the room.
Probably making the sounds, too.
Yeah,
He's probably like...
flapping his arms like wings.
Yeah, and gobbling.
Getting into it with the children. Yeah. You don't see John C. Calhoun there playing with Andrew Jackson's, adoptive grandchildren. And you're not going to see John C. Calhoun as 8th President of the United States either.
Yeah.
Van Buren
Calhoun probably teach him how to tie a noose.
Jackson would put Calhoun's head in that noose.
Exactly.
It was one of his regrets.
Yeah. As we know. So, really cool story aside. Also, as vice president, Van Buren urges conciliation during the nullification crisis. And this is such a huge thing. The nullification crisis. We got into it in episode 7.
Yeah.
We could do a brief refresher course as best we can. And
well, yeah,
what that boiled down to and Van Buren's role.
The South hated the tariff of 1828, believed it was unfairly taxing the South. They really wanted to get rid of the tariff. and they start talking about the doctrine of nullification, which is the alleged power of states to nullify federal laws that they don't like or deem to be unconstitutional.
And Jackson's like, oh, no, you didn't.
Yeah. So South Carolina purported to nullify the tariff, and, you know, it's a showdown that could lead to secession and civil war.
Right.
Jackson takes a hard line.
And Van Buren supports him wholly. And another huge conflict. Mm-hmm. The war on the bank. The Bank of the United States. Mr. Van Buren, the bank is trying to kill me. But I shall kill it. And Van Buren's by Jackson's side during all this. Little does he know the repercussions of the bank situation.
Yeah, it's going to play a role in Van Buren's presidency, but he stands behind Jackson and continues organizing the party, which is now kind of more of an official thing, openly calling itself the Democratic Party.
Right.
And in reaction, opponents of Jackson start calling themselves the Wig Party. We're back to a two-party system.
Why would they call themselves the Wig Party, Jim?
Well, the Whig Party was the classic opposition party of Britain.
Right.
The Whigs and the Tories. And we're done, you know, at the time of the American Revolution, you know, if you said I'm a Whig, that means you're a patriot, a revolutionary. Yeah. It's Tories and Whigs. So now the anti-Jackson party
have become the Whigs,
co-opting that image.
So now we're working our way back to another two-party system.
Yeah. Van Buren made it happen.
And yeah, his main task during his vice presidency, and he did it admirably well, all things considered, is to position himself, because he's being groomed. Yep. He is Jackson's hand-picked successor. He is going to be the next president of the United States.
Well, he's definitely going to get the Democratic nomination pretty easily.
Yeah.
Gets it without opposition, with Jackson's very popular endorsement and Van Buren's behind-the-scenes maneuvering. He easily gets the nomination.
Yeah.
Vice presidential nomination went to a guy that maybe wasn't Van Buren's first choice.
Certainly wouldn't have been Van Buren's first choice.
Not the first choice of Southerners, but he was the guy Jackson wanted, and that kind of put him over the top.
Yeah.
Richard Mentor Johnson of Kentucky.
Yeah. Who was a pretty wacky character.
Yeah.
Pretty wild character in history. Well, he got it. He was a longtime congressman. He swore up and down that he had personally killed Tecumseh. That was his big claim to fame. Everybody that ever met him was told, I'm the man that personally killed Tecumseh.
Yeah. Tecumseh died.
That was his thing.
Tecumseh died at the Battle of the Thames in 1813, and Richard Mentor Johnson was there in the battle. Who knows what happened, but he made a political career out of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, he really did. I mean, that was his claim to fame, was I'm the man that killed Tecumseh. And he was also pretty well despised by Southerners because he lived openly with a slave as a common law wife and acknowledged their children.
Yep.
That they'd had together.
So
that's
you don't do
pushing
that.
The boundaries back then.
Yeah, well, slave owners having relationships with their slaves and having children by them, common, but always unspoken.
Yeah.
The thing about him was that he was open about it.
Didn't care.
Didn't give a fuck, which, I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know that much about him, but to me it's incredible the guy could have a political career at this time with that kind of thing. So not only that,
he just didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, he had a long-term relationship with this woman who was his slave.
Yeah.
And his wife, unofficially at the same time.
Well, yeah, and then when she died, I think he ended up marrying another slave, didn't he?
Yeah, he got, not actually officially married.
Oh, okay.
He, started up again in a relationship with another slave woman, and then when she slept with another man, he sold her at auction and started a relationship with her sister.
Oh.
So this is the kind of tabloid scandalous shit that is going on at the time with Richard Mentor Johnson.
So why did Jackson want him to be the vice president?
I don't know. He was a very popular guy, I guess. I think he was popular with the common man, popular with the Westerners. I don't know that much about him, but there had to be something to him.
Seems like a loony.
He sounds like a loony based on the couple facts that we stated about him.
Well, then the different things that I've read about him too, I haven't heard anything necessarily good. I don't think.
He's kind of weird.
And if I have read, and I probably haven't just forgotten, I don't know what would have endeared him to Jackson to think that he would have been the best.
But, Van Buren, as a Northerner, Van Buren needs to ensure the support of the Southern wing of the Democratic Party. And the main way he has to do that is to make sure to be on the right side of the slavery issue, or at least to not be on the wrong side, which was the real challenge.
He's treading sketchy ground.
Because I guess he would consider slavery to be immoral, but hey, so did Thomas Jefferson and Madison and tons of people who actually owned slaves.
Van Buren didn't.
He didn't own slaves, and there were still some slaves in New York, but he didn't grow up in a major slave society. He believed that slavery was sanctioned by the Constitution, which it was, and he knew that it was the toxic issue that would kill his career if he wasn't careful about it.
Yeah.
And he had to, make sure that the Southerners knew that he wasn't an abolitionist and that he wasn't going to try to go after slavery where it already existed.
Yeah.
And he did a good enough job getting those assurances to have support. And he also got some help from the Whig Party that was not organized the way his party was and didn't have the party discipline and unity that the Democrats did.
Yeah, if there's one thing that the Whigs learned from this election it's that next time around we need to cop Van Buren's moves.
Yeah, because they're doing things the way that they were being done in 1824, which can't stand up against
it. Just ain't going to cut the butter.
Organized party now. So the Whigs ran 3 different candidates: Hugh Lawson White of Tennessee, Daniel Webster of Massachusetts, and William Henry Harrison of Indiana. They were hoping to split the vote enough to get the election into the House of Representatives,
which was legitimate political strategy at the time.
That's how they.
As crazy as that sounds.
Yeah.
I mean, that was their goal. Let's put enough people out there that we could prevent anybody from getting elected outright, and we could work our magic and form this our way.
Yeah, that's how Jackson got beat in 1824. And
precisely.
If they're looking at, say, it seems like Van Buren's going to get the most votes, if we split up all the rest of the votes enough, might be able to push it to the House and give the second place guy the presidency, who would have been a Whig. But
however,
didn't quite work.
Doesn't happen.
Van Buren's too well organized. He gets 51% of the vote, wins 15 out of 26 states, and he had a total of 170 electoral votes against 124 split between all the other candidates.
That's pretty big. That's a pretty big victory, really.
Yeah. It's a solid majority.
It is. I mean, when you split that 124 among 3 other people.
Yeah, I think the closest person was Harrison, who had like
I believe it was
70
Harrison.
something.
But it was so far beneath that it wasn't even a contest.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously the combined vote was far short.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Van Buren won handily.
He did.
And he is, at this point, had a masterful, true American dream career.
Yep.
And it's about to culminate in his reward of becoming the 8th president of these United States. How's it going to go for him?
Well, we'll find out
That's
after
right.
these words from our sponsors.
Don't fucking go nowhere. The Dead Presidents Podcast is brought to you in part by Mary Percival's Hot Springs. Mary Percival, having fitted up the hot springs in a superior style and procured an additional quantity of good servants, is prepared to receive and accommodate strangers and others in a manner better calculated to please those who may favor her with their patronage. Her table and bar are at all times furnished with the choicest articles the markets can produce. Every attention will be paid to make her guests as comfortable as possible. Listeners, there's a new place to be for steamy, sultry good times. If you're looking for hot, local singles, get down to Mary Percival's Hot Springs, where anything can happen. The water is sizzling, and so are the guests. The bar is open, and the patrons are open-minded. The hottest destination for fun and frivolity is Mary Percival's Hot Springs. Reserve your accommodations today.
We're also proud to be sponsored once again by the celebrated thoroughbred stud horse Cock of the Rock, who is standing to cover mares this season at the stables of William Brown for just $40 a mare. That is an opportunity you can't pass up. As we all know, Cock of the Rock is a living legend.
That's right.
He also happens to be the official stud horse of the Dead Presidents Podcast.
Precisely, James. And he's not just standing to cover mares this season. He is standing live with us now, right here in studio. Listeners, a very special treat. Welcome to the show, Cock of the Rock. The pleasure is all ours. We are big fans, as are many of our listeners, and I dare say, as well as their mares.
It was extremely dirty.
Yeah, I really hope that there weren't any young colts listening. Oh, my goodness.
We are so excited to have you here. We just can't get over how year in and year out you continue to impregnate mare after mare with foals that invariably grow up to be racing champions.
It's unbelievable, frankly.
You gotta tell us, Cock, how do you do it? What's your secret? Really? That is incredible. And the mares actually like that? Damn.
Wow.
Might just have to try that myself sometime.
Yeah, I am, I'm gonna tell you. Sounds to me like you're living the dream, Cock. What do you want to say to our listeners out there who have mares that might need covering? You heard that, listeners. And you better believe your mares heard it. Get on down to William Brown's stables for the covering of a lifetime. Just $40 a mare, payable the 1st of January next. Thanks for being here, Cock. Right back at you, buddy. And we're back, and ready to dive headfirst into the presidency of Martin Van Buren. When we last left him, it seemed like this was the culmination of a brilliant career. The just reward of somebody who had devoted themselves to pretty much creating a system of political party.
Yep, the consummate politician has climbed the political ladder, has reached the highest office in the land. Now he's going to be on Easy Street, right?
Unfortunately, it's not going to work out.
That's not the name of Pennsylvania Avenue.
No.
And when Van Buren moves into the White House, he enjoys a honeymoon of approximately 2 weeks.
Yeah, thereabouts. And then
before
pretty much all hell breaks loose, and an issue arises that is not only going to blemish Van Buren's career, it's going to cost him his presidency.
Yep.
We got the Panic of 1837. It's a financial crisis that sparks a 5-year depression.
Yeah, the economy had been booming.
Yeah, things had been okay, but what happens when you try to kill the bank?
Well, it's certainly more complicated than killing the bank.
Oh, certainly.
Really, the first part of the problem seems to be the Western land speculation bubble. Everyone had been speculating in Western land for decades. It was the big get-rich-quick scheme, and there was so much land out there. Louisiana Purchase, all this unsettled land was the most valuable asset the United States had. It's how they paid off the national debt under Jackson, by selling off Western land.
Right.
But, it became a bubble. Prices were, got too high for what the real values were going to be. And as soon as Van Buren takes office, the bubble burst. Jackson had tried to rein it in the previous year with the specie circular, which required land to be paid for in gold and silver, which is meant to kind of put a lid on rampant speculation.
Yeah, it just didn't work.
Yeah, that didn't work, because now having to pay for Western land in gold and silver, there's a huge demand for gold and silver in the West, and the banks in the East don't have enough gold and silver to back their own loans.
You had a shortage, and it's going to set off a wave of failures and crashes in real estate prices. It's going to be a mess. Yeah. And then, of course, the second killing, or and then, of course, the killing of the second bank of the United States does not matter.
Yeah, I mean, there are tons of banks all over the country, but the Bank of the United States was supposed to be kind of the central bank that other banks would, take their lead from, and that would kind of try to stabilize things. That wasn't around. All these little banks are blindsided by this bubble crashing. They don't have enough reserves. They can't redeem their notes for gold and silver, which is the hallmark of banknotes at the time. So banks fail all over the country. There's the crash in Western real estate prices. And there's...
Shit just starts to go south.
Oh, man, yeah.
Pretty much all across the board.
One thing after another. The price of cotton collapses, which is huge. The backbone of the U.S. economy pretty much at the time. We talked about how in like the Jefferson and Madison episodes, how Southern plantation owners were always in debt. Their estates were all leveraged on debt.
Right.
And
it was inescapable.
Their wealth was based on their crops. So all these loans, everyone in the South has loans that are essentially backed by cotton. And when the price of cotton collapses, they can't pay any of these loans. Everyone's defaulting. The banks are failing. Overseas, the British and Dutch bankers are feeling the effects of this, and they contract their own lending practices to protect themselves. And that fucks the American economy even more.
That's it. You're talking about businesses failing, farms going out of cultivation, high unemployment, states defaulting on their bonds, dogs and cats sleeping together, mass hysteria.
You know, none of this is Martin Van Buren's fault.
No.
He's not responsible
but he's gonna take the brunt of it.
It's gonna destroy his presidency. It doesn't matter that he didn't cause it.
Not only his presidency, but it like downright tarnishes his reputation. Everything that he had done up to this point, forget about it, because everybody else did.
Yeah, because he was
He's now Martin Van Ruin.
Yep. The first half of our episode, Van Buren was a huge success, but he's not remembered for his pre-presidential brilliance. He's remembered for not being able to fix the Panic of 1837.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter that there's probably nothing anybody could have done to stop this from happening or to fix it. That's just the way it was. Yeah. The economy was overextended through decades of speculation and all kinds of other factors. And at this time, the government wasn't regulating the economy the way it does in modern times. The president didn't have any thing to do. He didn't.
Yeah.
He was kind of blindsided by it.
Yeah,
and wasn't.
And his hands were a little bit tied. What could he have done, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the Whigs wanted to recharter the Bank of the United States, but frankly, I don't necessarily see how that even would have fixed it.
I don't see that would have worked.
No. And of course, Van Buren and the Democrats.
Because they would have deliberated over how to start it and charter it and fund it and who would run it.
Yeah, it's not.
For years.
Right, and it's not like
because it was like that was like a big thing with Jackson taking down Nicholas Biddle and some of these people.
Mm-hmm. It's not like you can just snap your fingers and make a new bank when all the other banks failed for a reason. It's not like a new bank would be immune to all those conditions.
Exactly. So we're in some trouble.
Yeah, Democrats are against that, but Van Buren wants to do an alternative to a new Bank of the United States, which is to establish an independent treasury system, whereas before Jackson, the United States had kept its money on deposit in the Bank of the United States. That's part of the potential problem of the Bank of the United States, maybe wielding too much influence, being backed by public money when it's, basically a private institution.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's part of why Jackson and his friends and Van Buren thought the bank was corrupt and a problem and not fair.
Right.
So they want to start an independent treasury, which would be that the government doesn't keep its money in any private bank, but in a government vault.
But is it maybe too soon, James?
Well, I mean,
it proves to be.
Yeah, it's too soon for the Whigs because Whigs are against it. This was kind of Van Buren's big signature program. It would also require the government to back its holdings with gold and silver and would limit its ability to print paper money.
Yeah.
Partially measures that theoretically would have helped had they been in place earlier.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily going to turn this around necessarily. And Whigs are against it. And
they've made gains too.
Yeah.
At this point, we got a turnaround. The Whigs have made gains. And some conservative Democrats defected to the opposition.
Yeah, the 1838 midterm elections, Whigs...
It didn't go so well for the Democrats, and that is a problem, because this is a brand new party that's supposed to be the new shining force.
Yeah, and they had a pretty solid majority, and now
of American politics.
They're barely holding on.
A lot can change in 2 years.
I think Van Buren finally got the independent treasury passed in his last year in office, but then I think the Whigs repealed it his first year out of office, because it would be something that would have to be reestablished during the Polk administration,
when it actually became the independent treasury.
But Van Buren,
as for Van Buren,
he's stuck
it just is not working out time-wise for him.
No. He's stuck with a depression that ends up lasting until about 1842 or 43. And it really wasn't any... Here's the thing. It's not any government policy that turns things around so much as it was the discovery of gold in California in the gold rush of 1849.
Correct. The California gold rush.
Put the economy back on its boom track.
And
hey,
the Mexican...
there was a big shortage of gold and silver.
Yeah.
We'll fix that.
The Mexican-American War helped.
Yeah, well,
too.
Certainly helped to acquire California.
I mean,
places where they saw gold.
Look at the Great Depression. All of FDR's socialist experiments, and what really started to turn that around, the fucking war.
Yeah.
But that's another story for another time. Now, we're talking about problems that Van Buren has pretty much inherited. And this financial crisis ain't the only one, James. We got a darker one, a more insidious one, because Martin Van Buren is coming in inheriting Andrew Jackson's Native American Indian policy.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot last episode. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 began the process of relocating southeastern Indian tribes to the west of the Mississippi. A lot of that happened under Jackson. A lot of tribes agreed to treaties to trade their land for land west of the Mississippi and went west, quote unquote, voluntarily, but not really. But couple tribes were not even going to do that. In 1835, the United States signed a treaty with some Cherokees to trade their land for land west of the Mississippi, but those Cherokees who signed that treaty turned out to not be representative of the tribe as a whole. Some of them were even assassinated for signing that treaty.
Yeah.
And the Cherokee tribe repudiated the treaty and protested it, refused to abide by its terms, but the United States enforced it anyway, and Martin Van Buren ordered General Winfield Scott to forcibly remove the Cherokees.
And it's going to bring us to just a disgusting chapter. And there's a lot of them. American history, God, is tarnished AF. So you're talking about Native Americans, real, true Americans being herded into internment camps in the summer of 1838 and over the winter, being forced to make the 1,000-mile journey to Oklahoma. Under this treaty, the U.S. Was supposed to provide wagons, rations, medical doctors, but naturally they failed to do so. Approximately 4,000 Cherokees died on the Trail of Tears, mostly from disease, malnutrition, and exposure to cold weather. A volunteer soldier from Georgia later said, "I fought through the Civil War and have seen men shot to pieces and slaughtered by thousands, but the Cherokee removal was the cruelest work I ever knew." The Seminole Indians also refused to cooperate with the removal, and President Jackson began the Second Seminole War, which lasted from 1835 to 1842. By Van Buren's presidency, starting to get a little unpopular.
Yeah, it's dragging on. This isn't like a lot of our other Indian wars that are very quick victories for the United States. The Seminoles are not making this easy, and it's starting to look like it's not even worth the effort to try to get them out. Van Buren tried to negotiate a peace, but that didn't last. The war continued. In 1840, a few Seminole chiefs were basically bribed into surrendering. Others kept on fighting. It wasn't until 1842 when the war ended with some Seminoles being allowed to stay in southwestern Florida on an unofficial reservation. The war ended up being very expensive, resulted in 1,600 American deaths, mostly from disease, along with 3,000 Seminole deaths. But the Seminoles outlasted the United States. I think that's why they still call themselves unconquered.
Yeah. More
More
power to them. Speaking of relations with other peoples, whether or not they were here before us, or whether we rebelled from them and claimed the land as our own. What was Martin Van Buren like in terms of international relations as president?
Well, there were a couple incidents with Canada. In 1837, some Canadians rebelled against British rule. They occupied an island in the Niagara River. Some sympathetic Americans sent supplies to the rebels on the steamship Caroline, but the British Canadian militia intercepted the ship, seized the Caroline in U.S. waters, set it on fire, and sent it over Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
On fire. That's actually sounds pretty badass.
Yeah.
I wish they had a video of that.
Yeah, that would have been incredible to see.
But one American was killed. I think another American was injured, and Americans are outraged.
And Van Buren himself is pissed. He denounces the incident and says it's an outrage. And he sends U.S. forces to the region, but at the same time, he's resisting calls for war. He's declaring U.S. neutrality in this Canadian rebellion.
And so that kind of blows over. It was something that could have...
So he's pissed off, but...
Could have blown up, but he...
plays it with caution.
Yeah. And then once again, another similar crisis along the Canadian border in 1839. The border between Maine and the Canadian province of New Brunswick was not really clearly defined. And in 1839, Maine and New Brunswick started arresting each other's citizens and expelling them from the disputed area. Again, there were calls for war, and Van Buren sent troops under Winfield Scott to maintain the peace. Van Buren met with the British ambassador and agreed to resolve the situation diplomatically.
So you got another border question resolved.
Yep, it wasn't until after Van Buren left office, but the Webster-Ashburn Treaty settled that border.
Well, do we give him credit? Does he deserve credit for Webster-Ashburn eventually? For what became it?
Somewhat. He certainly deserves credit for it not erupting into war prior to diplomatic resolution.
So maybe we're seeing here that Van Buren is avoiding a couple different conflicts here.
Yeah.
So maybe despite the crisis, the guy's an okay leader. It's just how the hell do you deal with something that nobody would have been prepared for?
Yeah.
Because honestly, in all fairness, how would Washington have handled it? How would Jefferson have handled it?
Yeah,
Look at how Jefferson handled a depression in his second term with the embargo.
Yeah, well, that's one that he caused.
Yeah. So Van Buren didn't even cause this.
Yeah, our system...
And he's not able to do anything to make it better, but he's trying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't know. I hope this episode opens people's eyes up that Martin Van Buren probably deserves a little bit more respect than he gets. He might be the Rodney Dangerfield of American presidents.
Yeah.
He just doesn't get no respect.
He doesn't.
Because he's able to deal with this kind of thing. Another big deal.
He got no respect from Steven Spielberg when it comes to our next issue.
That's right. We're gonna talk about the Amistad case.
Yep, 1839. Africans aboard the Spanish slave ship La Amistad rebelled, took over the ship off the coast of Cuba. They tried to return to Africa, but wound up off the coast of Long Island, where the U.S. Coast Guard took the ship into custody. The Spanish government sued for the return of the ship and the slaves as its property, while American abolitionists took up the cause of the Africans arguing for their freedom. So this is a political landmine for Martin Van Buren.
This is a huge, huge thing.
He's trying to keep abolitionism under the rug.
We've been talking about this, James.
Yeah.
This has already been bubbling beneath the surface, and it could be an eruption.
Yeah, this is another thing that comes out of left field for Van Buren. He's spent his whole career trying to keep abolitionism under the rug and keep slavery off the table. And then almost seemingly randomly, some foreign slave ship just lands on American soil and drops this issue right in his lap.
And also, I do want to say that that's not to his credit that he swept this under the rug.
Well,
that is not to Van Buren's credit. That is...
no.
That's a blemish.
It's a blemish on the entire generation.
Sure. So it's not him alone, but yeah. As a northern non-slave holder.
Yeah, he's trying to walk a fine line.
He is really trying to walk a tightrope and appease both sides. And, well, nowadays... it doesn't matter. You're wrong.
Yep. It's going to be a problem. So this is now a legal case. The lower court ruled that the Africans were free, but Van Buren appealed the decision to the Supreme Court. He's under a lot of pressure from Southerners and from Spain, and he wants to get reelected, so he needs Southerners on board, and he's afraid to let abolitionism have a victory because that's just going to spur them on to continue their fight and tear apart national unity.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's not necessarily abolitionism that's jeopardizing the unity, but
no, certainly not, but it's the issue.
From the standpoint of people who want to keep this under the rug, it looks like the abolitionists are making it an issue.
Oh, of course they are.
One of those guys, the most prominent abolitionist in the country at the time, is ex-president John Quincy Adams, who takes up the case in the Supreme Court and argues on behalf of the Africans and wins. The Supreme Court affirms the lower court's decision. Just a few days after Van Buren left office, the Africans got to go back home to Sierra Leone in 1842.
Yeah, and Anthony Hopkins plays him in the film. Who plays Martin Van Buren? Who the fuck knows? Because he's only in the film for about 25 seconds.
Well,
and they make him look like an idiot.
Yeah. He probably wouldn't want to be in the film longer.
Nope. Not in that light.
Nope.
And we just more and more big things going on here.
Yeah, there's another major...
For Martin Van Buren. And I'm sure most listeners at this point are like, Martin Van Buren, I might just skip this one. I might just skip this. Jackson's kind of a badass, and the other guy, like, died real fast, so that might be cool. But, damn it, if we didn't bring to light the importance of in history of Martin Van Buren.
Van Buren is cool. He has a street gang in his honor.
That's true.
At least in the Seinfeld universe. But yeah, here's another slavery-related issue, and this is going to be the one that Van Buren will finally not be able to shake, ultimately.
Yeah, this is the one that really ends him.
He makes it through his presidency on this, but it gets him in the rest of his career. But maybe to his credit. In 1836, Texans won their independence from Mexico. In 1837, just before he left office, Jackson diplomatically recognized the Republic of Texas, and Jackson was pushing hard for the U.S. to annex Texas.
Right.
And Southerners were in favor of it, but Northerners were generally opposed to it because it would mean expanding slavery and adding another slave state to the Union. And this is an issue Van Buren was always trying to avoid, but the Texas question is not going away.
Yeah. The Alamo. Remember it, James.
I remember.
Yeah. So do all Americans.
We all do.
Yeah. Anyway,
here's an issue where Van Buren doesn't just follow Jackson's lead.
Yeah, and this is it. For some reason. It's like the first break, really, between them. Van Buren is acting out of caution. It's over caution, in my opinion, that kills him here.
Yeah.
I think he's too... He's not sure.
Yeah, he's trying to kick
of what it's going to lead to, of what the national feeling is.
Yeah, so he tries to kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
In 1837, Texas asked to be annexed by the United States, and Van Buren delayed.
Yeah.
He said, it's a diplomatic issue with Mexico. We don't want to go to war with Mexico, so we have to work this out diplomatically.
Oh, yeah, he totally demurs on it.
And not just do it unilaterally. And then it seemed like Northern and Southern Democrats called like an unspoken truce on it for a while, because Northern Democrats were helping Southerners quash anti-slavery petitions in Congress.
Yeah.
With the gag rule that we talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
I think Congress passed new gag rules in 1837 and 38.
Yeah.
And as long as Northerners were going along with that, the Southerners were not going to push Texas too hard. And in 1838, Texas ended up withdrawing its request to be annexed for the time being, and the issue receded. But it's not going away.
Oh, it's far from over.
And it's going to cause problems for Van Buren later.
Well, and not only that, it's going to become probably the most divisive issue of this particular decade.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be what it all boils down to. And that's going to bring us to the election of 1840.
Yeah, what all this boils down to for Van Buren is a very,
a very uphill climb
for
re-election. I mean, he is in... he is in the John Adams spot. John Adams had a better shot of being reelected than Van Buren did at this point, really. And is it deserved? Debatable. We've talked about it, Where does Van Buren rate? I mean, Christ, he faced a hell of a lot. He did his best. I mean, but you're never going to see him above the lower middle of presidents in the ranking scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's for reasons aforementioned, whether or not it's warranted on him.
Yeah, I mean, whether you blame him personally or not, the economic situation was just, a dark cloud over the whole 4 years.
Yeah. And no matter what he did, I don't think he could have salvaged his reputation enough because of the crippling aspect of this depression. And I mean, we can't understate how bad that was. I mean, we're talking horrible.
Yeah.
The country had never seen anything like it at that point. A terrible depression.
Mm-hmm.
Really bad. We wouldn't see anything like it until the Great Depression.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, I mean, it's bad. Van Buren pretty much doesn't have a shot. Despite, his background. The Whigs could have put anybody up. And, it should have been Henry Clay at this stage, but
yeah,
they go with the Jackson candidate.
Yeah, 4 years later, in retrospect, the Whigs would certainly wish they had put up Henry Clay.
Absolutely.
But they went...
less.
Yeah.
Within a couple months after the victory, they would regret their decision severely. Because they could have gone with anybody, and if they'd known it, Clay, Daniel Webster, maybe. Mm-hmm. But no, they go with the Jackson candidate because that is using Martin Van Buren's tricks against him.
Yeah.
Their whole campaign in 1840 is Martin Van Buren. It's, hey, let's do exactly what fucking Van Buren would do, but for us.
Yeah, now this time the Whig Party is very well organized on the Van Buren model. They're united. They have only one candidate, and they pick the guy who's the most like Andrew Jackson that they can find.
Yeah.
But he supports the Bank of the United States and some other Whig policies.
Right.
William Henry Harrison is an older guy. He's around Jackson's age, and he's a military hero from the War of 1812, from Indian Wars. He won the Battle of Tippecanoe and the Battle of the Thames, defeating Tecumseh. But this was, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But he's a war
hero. It doesn't matter. He's Jacksonian in image. They're really, really using Martin Van Buren's playbook against him.
Yep. They give the vice presidential nomination to John Tyler of Virginia, and this election, it's been called the first modern presidential campaign. This is the first time the candidates actually campaigned in their own cause. And it's also the first time there are just really widespread rallies,
events,
and
just
slogans.
Big events, songs, gatherings, parties, slogans, the whole kit and caboodle. You got Dippy Canoe and Tyler too.
Great slogan. The Whigs depicted Harrison as the log cabin and hard cider candidate.
Falsely.
He's a simple frontiersman who favored the common man. See, the thing is,
he was an aristocrat, a Virginia member of the Virginia slave aristocracy.
Yeah. Well, he was born into a very wealthy Virginia family. He did go out to the frontier and serve as, governor and military leader in the western frontier. But it's Van Buren who's the guy who grew up poor. He's the common man, but they paint him as an out-of-touch snob with his fancy clothes and his fancy garden that he built in the White House during a depression.
Yeah, he's the aristocrat, not Harrison. Not the guy from plantation slave wealth.
There's a guy in the House, I think his name was Charles Ogle, who gave a speech that's called, I think it's called the Golden Spoon Oration. This was this very sarcastic speech that talked about how about the Van Buren White House, like they were spending too much money to refurbish the White House, and a lot of it was false and very exaggerated, but it was just painted Van Buren as this snob who's like eating French food with a golden spoon while the rest of the country is starving. And it was a very like humorous speech that just lampooned Van Buren and helped the Whigs paint him.
Yeah, and it didn't help him, and the way he carried himself didn't help fan the flames any. Because, as we've said before, this is a guy that took a bath every day. Mm-hmm. This is a guy that was meticulously well-dressed and
to
groomed.
Imagine that as an attack act.
Yeah, like
Martin
seriously.
Van Buren.
Martin Van Buren.
every day.
Martin Van
What
Buren.
is he hiding?
Yeah.
What is he trying to wash off?
You can't wash the blood off your hands, Martin Van Buren.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. You know? But yeah, that like, he was looked at as a complete prude. Wearing a corset. And, you know, riding around in a carriage with his goblet of wine. Whereas Harrison was the rough and tumble man of the people, drinking hard cider and playing cards with the boys, you know.
Yeah.
Which is complete bullshit, but hey, it worked. And Van Buren got pretty fucking dominated.
Yeah, the Whigs, the songs they sang, Van is a used up man.
Yeah.
And it was kind of true. Van Buren, he only lost the popular vote 53 to 47%.
Yeah.
And he was almost within 100,000 votes, I think. So
I think it's just because of the Jacksonian thing. I think the common people maybe were just like, yeah, I can't believe that because Jackson, you know? This was Jackson's guy.
Yeah.
So I think there were people that just, for the sake of Jackson, held out for Van Buren.
There wasn't some kind of accident that the Democrats had dominated the Whigs for years as well. So they still had a strong base.
Right.
So it was 53 to 47%, but the Electoral College was 234 to 60, which was not close.
And Van Buren just absolutely, what had to really hurt the most is he lost New York.
Yep. He doesn't even have his home state of New York
where
anymore.
He did all of his best work coming up.
Yeah.
You know, and not to capture that even. Boy, things are looking pretty dim for the little magician. Does he have any tricks up his sleeve? Or is he going to fade into obscurity as a failure? Find out when we come back after a word from these, our beloved sponsors.
The Dead Presidents Podcast is brought to you in part by Mrs. Mott, the celebrated female physician, who respectfully gives notice to the ladies of the vicinity that she has commenced practice at number 74 Leonard Street across from the National Theater. Having collected during her late tour in Europe many herbs, roots, and essential oils not to be obtained in America, Mrs. Mott will be enabled to meet diseases in their most formidable appearances. The great success which has attended her treatment of diseases in this country is a guarantee of what may be expected. Mrs. Mott pledges herself to cure or relieve the following diseases: rheumatism, palsy, consumption, dropsy, the king's evil, canker, ringworm, dyspepsia, asthma, jaundice, hemorrhoids, and many more.
Wow.
Children who are troubled with weakness of the urinary passage can be cured by Mrs. Mott, who has made the disease a particular branch of her study. You heard that, listeners. Is your child pissing the bed and stuffy old male doctors aren't able to fix it? Call Mrs. Mott, who has the expertise and the bedside manner to bring a permanent end to bedwetting. Are chronic hemorrhoids making your life miserable? Mrs. Mott's feminine touch, combined with her European essential oils, will have you sitting comfortably again in no time. No matter what your ailment, you can't go wrong with our sponsor, the celebrated female physician, Mrs. Mott.
Now an important message from George Kerfoot, who has available for sale at his drug and chemical store a full assortment of perfumery. He has many articles which are in high demand, including Oriental Powder of Alabaster, Bloom of Roses, Purified Bear's Oil, French Toilet Powder, Milk of Roses, Pearl Powder, Court Plaster, Fancy Soap, Cologne Waters, Toothbrushes, Freckle Wash, Balm of Columbia, Balm of Virginia, and Persian scent bags. If you're like a lot of our listeners, you probably smell like shit. Sitting around wallowing in your own filth while you listen to a groundbreaking presidential podcast all day can have that effect. But no worries. That's where George Kerfoot comes in. Just apply a little of his Oriental Powder of Alabaster, maybe a splash of some Milk of Roses, and you'll smell better than a garden of freshly bloomed flowers. If you're looking to attract the opposite sex, try a little dab of Purified Bear's Oil, and you'll be utterly irresistible. But don't use too much, or you'll have an army of suitors literally beating down your door. All thanks to George Kerfoot's perfumery, available exclusively at his drug and chemical store, conveniently located at number 5 Center Square. Get your rancid ass down there today! And also be sure to hit us up on Twitter at DeadPrez Podcast, where you can find out more about our sponsors and see their original ads published in newspapers during Martin Van Buren's presidency. And now, back to our show. Welcome back to the show, and we're about to talk about the post-presidential life of Martin Van Buren. Things have pretty much completely fallen apart for him, and he's returned to Kinderhook. But perhaps he's not just wallowing in despair this whole time. Perhaps he's watching while the Wig Party unity falls apart.
Yeah.
In front of the eyes of the nation.
Yeah. Well, he's probably...
Harrison dies 31 days into his term. And the new president, former Democrat John Tyler, refused to follow the lead of his Whig cabinet and was soon expelled from the party. We got some problems over on the Whig side.
Yeah, they're in disarray. And in 1842, Van Buren, dipping his toe back in the pool, goes on a trip around.
This gives him some ideas. The gears start turning.
Yeah,
and he says to himself, hey, these guys look disorganized. Well, if there's one thing I know about, it's organization.
Yeah, so he pulls out his old playbook and he's going to do what he used to do, which is travel throughout the United States and make connections with everybody. And he goes all over, goes out west and through the south. In Illinois, he spent an evening trading stories with a young man named Abraham Lincoln.
Would have liked to have been a fly on the wall for that.
Yeah. They apparently stayed up all night telling funny stories to each other. Abraham Lincoln, not, well known at the time.
Yeah, and Abraham Lincoln, of course, would...
few years before he went into the House.
Yeah, as a Whig. So,
yeah.
You're talking opposition party.
Yep.
That would be an interesting document.
Reaching across the aisle, shaking hands with Abe Lincoln. And then when the 1844 Democratic National Convention rolls around, Van Buren finds himself as the front runner.
Yeah.
So nobody else really stepped forward to claim the party mantle. So it's going to be Van Buren again. They're going to put him... He's going to get renominated, isn't he?
Yeah, Tyler seems like he's in trouble. Until he revives the issue of Texas annexation.
And that puts Van Buren back in trouble.
Right. It's a back and forth chess game at this point. And even though he knows full well it's going to cost him Southern support, Van Buren comes out against annexation. He says that now is not the time. We're not ready for this because it could lead to war, and we don't want a war.
Yeah, he successfully delayed this issue during his presidency, but now he really has to kind of take a stand. And does so to the detriment of his political prospects, but he sticks with his beliefs and finally kind of takes a stand against slavery that he didn't really do earlier in his career.
Yeah.
And it costs him the nomination.
That's right. So how do we judge Van Buren in history for that? Because I think the tendency would be to condemn the annexationists, in a sense, because of the exacerbation of slavery. One finds it easy to condemn Polk, let's say, for the Mexican War and for burgeoning the cause of slavery, which isn't patently true. But there's that stigma.
Yeah.
And here Van Buren is basically sacrificing his political career. And do we remember him any more fondly for that? No. We just remember him as a failed president and a loser, and that's not...
Well,
I think we're proving differently here.
That's not how our listeners will remember him.
Certainly not.
From now on. So, yeah, at the Democratic Convention, he needed to get a 2/3 majority to win the nomination, and even though Van Buren led on the first 4 ballots, it was clear that he was not going to get that 2/3, not being against annexation.
Yeah.
So the whole convention kind of went back to the drawing board, and it was the original dark horse candidate, James K. Polk, ended up winning the nomination and defeating Henry Clay in the general election. Yeah. Henry Clay running 4 years too late.
Yeah. And Polk, of course, big-time Jacksonian Democrat, loyal Jacksonian, managed to get through all of the controversies of the Jackson and Van Buren years totally unscathed. He pretty much had done nothing to upset anybody. He was just acceptable. It ended up being a really good choice. Yeah. And in turn, Polk offers to appoint Van Buren minister to Great Britain, but Van Buren declines. He prefers to remain close to the New York political machine. So that would have been interesting. He could have been what he didn't get to be.
Yeah. He almost got to be minister to Great Britain before.
Yeah.
Now he gets another chance, but he doesn't.
Just wasn't in the cards.
He doesn't want it anymore. He wants to stay involved in New York state politics, but how's that work out for him during the Polk administration?
Well, not too great. Polk is a man of his own accord. He has his own agenda. He will not be dictated to. He does things himself. So, he, quote-unquote, fails to consult Van Buren on New York appointments, and there's a pretty serious falling out. it doesn't get amended.
No.
No.
Well, no, they're not going to make up because of what Van Buren does next, I guess. Now that he's kind of on the outs with the Polk administration, he once again feels free to, follow his heart on some issues and not follow the Democratic Party, and takes a more openly anti-slavery position by supporting the Wilmot Proviso, which was the unsuccessful proposal to ban slavery in the new territories acquired during the Mexican-American War.
Right. And we're going to be talking about this in episode 11. That was inserted into a bill, establishing the peace for the Mexican-American War. It was it was thrown in there, and Polk was like, "Whoa, where did that come from? What the hell's this got to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
This could fuck the whole thing. This is terrible." And tried to rally his troops and get his support, and Van Buren was like, fuck it.
Yeah, this would solve the problem he had with Texas annexation.
Yeah.
If you don't expand slavery, then it's fine to get all these new territories, but that's not going to go over with the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to lead to a split of the New York Democratic Party.
Yep.
Because by the time 1848 rolls around, Van Buren's stance, he's gotten support now from not only Northern Democrats, but abolitionist Whigs.
Yeah.
The guy that created the Democratic Party, the guy that basically ushered in the age of Jackson, has support from abolitionist Whigs now.
Wow.
How's that for a turnaround?
It's pretty big. The anti-slavery faction of the New York Democrats were called the Barn Burners. And at the 1848 Democratic National Convention, the Barn Burners, led by John Van Buren, the former president's son,
Right.
bolted the convention and split from the party, joining forces with other abolitionist groups, and formed the Free Soil Party.
That's right. The Free Soil Party would nominate none other than John's father, ex-president Martin Van Buren, as its presidential candidate, and Charles Francis Adams, son of John Quincy Adams, as its vice presidential candidate.
What an odd couple on that ticket.
Indeed.
Jackson's
So you got
protege with the son of the man who had a very rancorous rivalry with Jackson.
Just an odd couple if ever there was one politically, for sure.
Wow.
And so, after a career built on, not just party loyalty, he built the party that one would have to become loyal to.
Yeah.
Van Buren accepts the third-party nomination for president.
Yeah, he said that he believed, quote, the long-term welfare of the Democratic Party and the nation required that the Democratic Party shed its Calhounite influence, even at the cost of losing an election or two. Van Buren sees that slavery is going to kill the Democratic Party if it doesn't rid itself of it.
Right.
And so
that is one thing that Polk fails to see. Polk has a lot to say about John Van Buren and Martin Van Buren in his diaries and in his letters. And frankly, he blames them for destroying the thing that they created.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in particular, Martin Van Buren, he blames him for attempting to destroy the thing that he helped to create.
Yeah.
In terms of the Democratic Party, because 1848 comes down to Van Buren becoming a traitor and sabotaging the party and giving it away to somebody that Polk feels is completely unfit.
Yeah, the Whig candidate is General Zachary Taylor, successful general of the Mexican-American War. Once again, Whigs going with a successful general.
A successful aging general.
Who had no political experience.
And there'll be another, well, we will be getting there in the future episodes, but like some of these aging Whig generals have another thing in common that's kind of strange and morbid. They keep dying.
Yeah. Zachary Taylor didn't last his whole presidency. The Democratic candidate in 48 was Lewis Cass. And
Lewis Cass was from Michigan. And I think in my reading of this era and from Polk's diaries and stuff, one of the best and worst things Polk did for himself was pledge not to run a second term. He knew that he wasn't going to run.
Yeah.
Nobody believed him and figured that he would do it at the last second. He kept saying no, he wouldn't. But nobody believed him. Because a lot of people thought he was like a snake.
Yeah.
Like a really cunning political mastermind that could, like Van Buren, in a sense. Except less amicable. He was like a less friendly, a colder Van Buren. But, yeah, he pretty much blamed them for ruining 1848 and for potentially standing to lose everything that his administration had fought for and gained.
Yeah, because Van Buren, in 1848, he didn't win any states, but he got 10% of the popular vote.
Right.
And guys like James K. Polk thought that was what tipped the balance in favor of the Whigs and Zachary Taylor beating Lewis Cass, is the former Democrat siphoning off votes.
I didn't really exactly finish my point. Cass was a senator from Michigan. He probably wasn't the best candidate that the Democrats could have put forward, but without Polk, who would you put? You couldn't do George Dallas because of the Buchanan Rift and the Pennsylvania fighting. You had to have Pennsylvania. It came down to so much territorial bickering that Lewis Cass was just like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Instead of actually finding somebody good. Polk probably would have got the nomination handily.
Yeah.
But he had said that he wasn't going to run, and even though pretty much nobody believed him, he was true to his word, and he did not intend to run again, ever. At any point was he planning on doing it.
Maybe if the party had Martin Van Buren organizing it, it could have got its shit together and put up a better candidate and been more unified.
It's a distinct possibility, but at that point,
other team now.
It was done. And that's one thing about Van Buren that's really fucking crazy, and definitely walk away from this episode knowing that Martin Van Buren pretty much built a political party and then walked away from it for his own personal principles when he felt that it became beyond what he felt.
Yeah, well, I mean, he believed he was...
So is that really noble?
Well, I think it was because he was trying to save the Democratic Party from slavery, and he did come back to the Democratic Party after 1848. He didn't really do anything major, but the Free Soil Party later merged with the new Republican Party. Van Buren, he stayed a Democrat, I guess. He supported Democratic candidates in the next elections.
Yeah, I mean, he supported the Compromise of 1850.
Stephen Douglas in 1860. But when the southern states began to secede from the Union after Lincoln's election, Van Buren tried to call for a constitutional convention as a potential way of resolving the crisis.
Yeah.
I don't think that went anywhere.
No.
Also, Franklin Pierce tried to organize a meeting of the living ex-presidents to try to maybe use their influence to negotiate
a novelty idea,
peace.
but just never went anywhere. Just trying to gather everybody that was still alive that had been president to say, like, okay, hey, what would you do? What would you do? You know? A novelty idea. Didn't go anywhere. And, of course, when the Civil War begins, Van Buren, he declared support for the Union, as you would, and called on New York Democrats to support Lincoln. And this is going to bring us to the end of his life. I mean, he's getting up there, and his health is beginning to fail by late 1861. He's bedridden. He's got pneumonia. The winter of 1861-62 is tough, and eventually he succumbs to bronchial asthma and heart failure at home in Kinderhook, July 24th, 1862, age 79. President Lincoln ordered the government to be closed the next day and morning. Flags were flown at half-staff, and all Union officers wore black armbands for the next 6 months in honor of Van Buren. So, what happened to Martin Van Buren? Why isn't he better known than he is? Is it just because the mutton chops? The sideburns, rather? The side whiskers? You know, he looks silly?
Yep. I don't know. I think it's more the, just the economic depression that plagued his presidency.
Yeah.
Gets to be the major issue in his legacy. But as our listeners know, he did a lot more things.
Yeah.
Had a lot of successes in his life.
Yeah, you probably know too much about Martin Van Buren.
Yeah, more than you ever wanted to know.
Yeah.
But if you want to know even more about Martin Van Buren, you can visit his home in Kinderhook, New York, as we did.
Yeah, highly recommended. It was a really nice little tour, and as many of the presidential homes are, upkept by the
National Park Service.
The National Park Service, yeah, great people.
Yeah.
Excellent tour guides, really amicable and friendly and willing to answer pretty much any question that you have that they can answer, Yeah,
it's a pretty...
They do a great job, so heads up, kudos to them.
Pretty nice house. Shows how Van Buren became a success after being born poor. Died in a pretty nice house.
Yeah, like his bathroom. Yeah, because we mentioned this guy bathed every day, people. Every day. Yeah, this guy took a bath.
He had indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
It was very early.
Yeah, super early, indoor
flushing
plumbing
toilet.
Rigged up with, a functional flushing toilet.
Yeah.
Which we saw. You could see it at the house. Yeah. On God. This guy was clean.
Yeah. He was bathing. He was flushing.
Mm-hmm.
Way ahead of his time.
He was grooming.
Way ahead of his time in hygiene.
Yeah.
For most hygienic president yet. Probably.
Yeah, he was easily the cleanest president. I don't know. Martin Van Buren was a clean fella. We'll put it that way.
Someday we'll do a top 5 most hygienic presidents.
Yeah. Perhaps.
We have
one thing that we wanted to bring up was and it kind of did come up here with the Free Soil Party. And this connection between John Quincy Adams and Martin Van Buren. Which there is an interesting connection between these two people, between Andrew Jackson. Two great politicians. And, maybe JQA more in line as a statesman. Van Buren more in line as a politician. But two titans.
Yeah, both had very long and very successful pre-presidential careers.
Yeah.
Both had distinguished post-presidential careers.
Both of these men deserved the presidency. It was what should have been the culmination, the crowning achievement of their life's work. And both of them ended up inheriting a shit show. More or less.
Yeah, both of them had, 4 years of not success, not really getting anything done.
Bad. Bad to the point that neither one got reelected. Neither one really got to do anything that they might have liked to do.
Yeah.
Van Buren, we might not have even talked about some of the things that Van Buren wanted to do because he didn't have any chance to come up with anything.
Yeah.
He came into it with like, oh, wow, shit. I've been in here 2 weeks, and before I could formulate a single goddamn thing, I got this.
Yeah, both.
And John Quincy Adams just never had the chance to do anything.
Yeah, John Quincy Adams and Van Buren both have their historical reputations dragged down because of their presidency from their otherwise much more successful career.
Yeah.
And then right in between them, 8 years
is Andrew
of
Jackson.
Andrew Jackson,
so
who
you
was
got,
very successful.
John Quincy Adams is like a doughy top piece of bread. It's not quite cooked enough. It's kind of doughy, a little spongy, a little cold, a little clammy. And you get that hot piece of meat that's Andrew Jackson in the middle. And then the bottom end is Martin Van Buren is just burnt to a crisp. It's just beyond edible. It's just a crunchy piece of what used to be bread. And that's how, both of those guys, masters politically. Whether for statesmanship or for political mastery. The people that seemed best suited for the role of the presidency just ended up getting just shit time. Just sorry about the luck.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing. Is what it seems like. And, yeah. Tough break.
Yeah.
But hopefully, with our podcast, we've, enlightened people to both of those great former presidents and helped people to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, we want to
I think it would
revive their reputations, at least as far as we can, and let people know about all the non-presidential stuff that Martin Van Buren did.
Absolutely.
If you want to learn more about Martin Van Buren, there's some good books about him. I just read the Ted Widmer biography of him, part of the American President series. Very concise biography, but it was pretty good.
And I own and have read snippets of, perused sections of John Niven's classic scholarly biography on Van Buren, which I think pretty much people say that's the definitive one on him. But I haven't read the
I'm sure all our listeners are going on Amazon right now to order both those books, and they're going to be reading them all next week.
Yeah, and if you got Prime, you'll get it within a couple days, hopefully. So, to pump you up further, let's try and sum up Martin Van Buren. Can we sum up MVB? No, certainly we can't. Let's leave it up to his contemporaries, James.
Yes.
Who do we got first? We have none other than Representative Davy Crockett of Tennessee, who said this about MVB in 1835. Van Buren is as opposite to General Jackson as dung is to a diamond. He is what the English call a dandy. When he enters the Senate chamber in the morning, he struts and swaggers like a crow in the gutter. He is laced up in corsets such as women in town wear, and, if possible, tighter than the best of them. It would be difficult to say from his personal appearance whether he was man or woman, but for his large whiskers.
We have a quote from Representative Charles Ogle of Pennsylvania. This is from the infamous Gold Spoon oration.
Right.
The Democratic President's house is furnished in a style of magnificence and regal splendor that might well satisfy a monarch. This is that plain, simple, humble, hard-handed Democrat whom the people have been taught to believe is at the head of the Democratic Party. He may call himself a Democrat, such no doubt he professes to be, but then there is a great difference between names and things.
There you have it. Some nasty criticism against old MVB. But people had some nice things to say about him too, didn't they, Jim?
They did. We got Washington Irving, famous author, Ichabod Crane, the
old legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Devoted Democrat, friend of Aaron Burr, as Martin Van Buren once was. And Irving says of Van Buren, "The more I see of Mr. V.B., the more I feel confirmed in a strong personal regard for him. He is one of the gentlest and most amiable men I have ever met with."
That famous Van Buren charm.
Indeed.
Just able to woo people over, including none other than John Quincy Adams, whom we've just talked about in relation to Martin Van Buren, who said this in 1836. Van Buren, like the sosie of Molière's Amphitryon, is l'ami de tout le monde. This is perhaps the great secret of his success in public life, and especially against the competitors with whom he is now struggling for the last step on the ladder of his ambition. Van Buren's principle is the talisman of democracy, which, so long as this union lasts, can never fail. That's some nice words.
Indeed.
In regards to Martin Van Buren, calling him a friend of the world and calling his principle the very talisman of of democracy. That is a strong statement coming from somebody as critical as John Quincy Adams. So if John Quincy Adams going to say that in 1836 about MVB, hey, it's time we cut the guy some slack, Jack.
Yeah.
MVB reboot, baby. That's going to bring us to the end of our show.
I think by now all of our listeners are clamoring for membership in the Van Buren Boys.
That's right.
We got our 8 fingers.
8 fingers up, baby. That's the way we all do it now, brother.
And keep all 8 of your fingers up for the music of the Constitutionalists, who will end the episode with their soon-to-be classic tune,
Martin Van Buren. Thanks for listening.
Power in public opinion in this country, and I thank God for